I'm excited to be here. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I always thought that I was the first drag queen in my family. But it turns out my dad beat me to it. I know. So it was the year 2001. I was 19. I just moved to Sydney from Brisbane the year prior. And my identity was expanding fast. And I was becoming all of these new things. And I was having so many fresh experiences. But as far as everybody from Brisbane knew, I was the same old Shano. And I'd always had such an honest relationship with my mum and dad. And I was struggling to have regular conversations with them because everything I said was a lie, because everybody that I met in Sydney had these horror stories about coming out, and I didn't want my new joy in Sydney to ruin my old life with mum and dad. And I know a queer person telling a coming out story in spring, groundbreaking. But if ChatGPT has read my memoir and edited this story how I intend it, then this story should be about my dad. So, actually, I did try using ChatGPT and it was useless at this, so I actually had to go and read my memoir back and pull out the bits and write it myself, which is the name of the game, so the shortcut didn't work. But my mum and dad announced plans to come to Sydney, and I was starting to build myself up to tell them my secret, and they were staying at the Holiday Inn in King's Cross, and we met for dinner, and it was wonderful to see them, and Mum had a big warm smile, and my dad had his big moustache, which is quite iconic. You need to think of like Merv Hughes, but a naturopath, and from Brisbane. And that night at dinner, there was a bit of a disconnect. I'd evolved in the year since I'd seen them last, and I didn't know how to be the same Shano that they expected me to be. And we talked on the phone from Sydney to Brisbane, but it was long distance, and that was charged by the minute, and it was quite expensive back then. And so the conversations, while regular, were always quite brief. And so I was attempting to ease into the inevitable. I regaled them with stories of my new life and my new friends, like Mogadonna, Vanity, Penetration, Testicle, and Girl Craig. And I was careful never to talk about my sexuality, but clearly my mum was picking up on some things, and she said, "Is Girl Craig your special friend?" I was like, "Oh, I've got to pee." And my dad was like, "I've got to get a drink." And I stood up and rushed from the table. And I came back to the table, and we never talked about it again for the rest of the meal. But after dinner, I walked out of the Holiday Inn. I stood at the intersection of Darlinghurst Road and William Street, and the Coca-Cola sign buzzed above my head, and I was just like confused about what to do. And King's Cross was alive and buzzing. Can you imagine? Yeah. Those were the days. But I only had one more day to tell Mum and Dad my secret before they went back to Brisbane. And nothing Mum and Dad had ever said gave me an idea that they would have a negative impression if I told them I was gay, but I had still picked up all of these negative ideas and was crippled by fear. And so the next day I headed to work at Global Gossip. It was an internet cafe on Oxford Street, which is where people used to... I feel like everybody in this room is of the age where they might remember internet cafes, except for you, Emily. But it was a place where you would go to pay to use the internet on a computer. And it was pretty simple customer service, but I just couldn't focus, and I just needed a moment to myself. So when it came to the lunch break, I headed home, and I just tried to gather myself, and instead I just fell apart. And there was a bottle of wine in my fridge, so I cracked it open on my lunch break and began to drink. And this was out of character. I wasn't one to drink normally in the daytime by myself, and I switched on the television looking for some distraction, and there was Touched by an Angel. Do you remember that show? Very Christian show about some angels who would save people. And there was no couch, and so I'd sat on the floor watching and drinking and crying, and the fear of the rejection just made me feel physically ill until I couldn't keep my secret anymore, and I couldn't wait another second. So I took my Nokia 3210 with its black and green screen, so I knew you were of the age, and I wrote a text to my mum. I am gay. Sent. I remember the relief. It was out in the world. Texting was a different thing back then, obviously. It was a numeric keypad. So to send a text, I had to push the numbers 444-026-042-999, send. And then a monophonic ring beeped to announce Mum's reply. That's nice, dear. See you at dinner. That was it. I had wrapped myself in a knot, and that was it. That's nice, dear. See you at dinner. It was so anticlimactic. But anyway, I had a crushing weight lifted from my shoulders, and then there was a whole new wave of tears that came out. And I could finally be honest with my parents again. And then over dinner, I discovered that I wasn't my mum and dad's first brush with a queer person. Do you remember Jim and Rudy? Mum said. And I vaguely recalled meeting two guys who were a couple when I was younger. And Dad was like, oh, what about the lesbians? Referring to some other friends who were, as their appellation suggests, lesbians. I think so. Oh, do you know Carlotta? My mum asked. Well, apart from when I used to watch her on Beauty and the Beast, when I'd chuck a sickie and stay home from school, I had met the Aussie trans icon a few times, and Mum, a former beauty therapist, told me that she used to wax Carlotta's legs. And all the lay girls used to come up to the Persian room where my mum was a barmaid and have a... My mum was a barmaid at a strip club. Receptionist at a brothel. All of the lay girls would have a knock-off drink after they'd finished up the road. Well, Dad, oh gosh, I used to love going to see the lay girl show. That was so wonderful. And hey, Shano, did I ever tell you I used to live with 6 drag queens and Marsha Hines back in the 70s? I was absolutely gagged. Oh my God, my mum and dad were intentionally one-upping each other on their proximity to queerness. But Dad's revelation floored me. Why hadn't I known this 24 hours earlier? Shano, you look pretty good dressed as a Sheila. Well, since you mention it, I thought I may as well just hold the bag open and let all of the cats run out in one night. And I told them that I also do drag. And it was a pity that our phones didn't take or hold photographs back then, because I didn't have any photos to show them. But I told them that my name was Courtney Act, and that I'd started doing drag socially, and that I had performed a couple of times, and we drank more wine, and I was surprised by how well Dad was taking the news. He was really leaning in, probably a bit more than I was, in fact. And he was interested to know about my love life and about drag and my new world, and relishing this fresh new level of honesty as an opportunity to connect and be a part of my life that had been previously kept at arm's length. And I guess this was the opposite to the rejection that I was expecting. And my mum was being very supportive as well. I do suspect that below the surface she was hashing over all of those frightening scenarios that had made it so hard for me to come out. And then she said, oh, we'll have to come and see you perform next time we're in Sydney. And I was like, oh, yeah, that would be nice. Thanks, Mum. And then Dad dropped the bomb. I went to sleazeball once in drag. What? Dad, this is my coming out. I mean, Dad telling me this made me actually feel quite uneasy. I didn't know where it was going, and I was just like, the possibility made me quite uncomfortable, and I was too filled with shame about my own identity to reconcile the story my dad was telling me with the images that sons build of their dads. And he said, yeah, the drag queens I lived with, they dressed me up one night and got rid of all my body hair, even your moustache, even my moustache. And he said he had a great night, but I don't know how you wear those heels, bloody uncomfortable. A man's takeaway. But it left me speechless. Like my mouth was agape. And he told me that he was working on a construction site at the time, and at work on Monday I had a hell of a time explaining to the boys why I had no body hair. But I just wanted to put my fingers in my ears. I didn't want to know more. I will say that Dad and I have, in the many years that have passed, discussed, and I've leaned in and heard all of these wonderful stories that made me feel a lot closer, but I wasn't quite ready for Dad's level of solidarity that night. I was like, all right, I need to go to the bathroom. But I didn't care what anybody else thought, only my mum and Dad. So once I was out to them, I was happy I could proudly walk around in the world with confidence. And that primary bond is so fundamental to self-acceptance. And I'm so grateful to Mum and Dad that I had such a great first reception. And it wasn't the end of the journey, but knowing that my parents thought who I was worthy of love really, I think, changed me forever. And it turns out that I wasn't the one breaking the mould. I was just following in my dad's 6-inch high heel footsteps. So I love you, Mum and Dad. Thank you.
Jenek.